this evening. Take it away, Fraser.
Yeah, interesting guest we have on tonight, Matt Freeman, a new manager of Sport Pembrokeshire, well known in this area, and obviously been in the Sport Pembrokeshire team for a long time, and stood up last year to take over the reins from Ben Field. Matt, great to have you on with us. And firstly, before we get into the nitty gritty and start interrogating you here, how have you found stepping into the role? It's obviously you've been in the organisation for so long, but it's a new job for you.
It is, yeah. Thanks very much for having me tonight, guys. I'd been in the organisation for 15 plus years, so to a certain extent, I knew the ins and outs. But as you alluded to, Fraser, stepping up to the senior role in particular is interesting, should we say, given the current financial climate and obviously the challenges that everybody has faced over the past 2.5, 3 years as a consequence of the pandemic. So it's an exciting time, to be perfectly honest, stepping into the shoes as the manager, but one that is really, really enjoyable at this moment in time.
You mentioned the climate and the challenge and stuff. You've obviously gone from the COVID pandemic straight into an economic crisis, which is helpful for everyone in any kind of position of authority. But on a serious note, Matt, where do you see the outlook now of maybe school sport and certainly junior sport? We'll start with that at the county at the moment. Have we come out the other side of the pandemic, and have we been adversely affected? I guess you guys perhaps have more access to perhaps the numbers and the stats.
Certainly, yeah. It is a really, really good question, and it's a really important one that does require a lot of in-depth understanding, to be honest, because schools in the county undertook a Sport Wales School Sport Survey for the first time in the summer, which gives a real snapshot of what's going on with regards to participation rates at a school-based level, but also, more importantly, a community-based level as well. And it's posed some very interesting insight from a community perspective. There's obviously specific demographics that are participating more frequently than others. So if we took our most affluent compared to our least affluent, there's a 15% discrepancy between our most affluent and least affluent participating 3 or more times a week. That is a figure that is replicated not only in Pembrokeshire but regionally and nationally. The national figure is slightly higher. There's an 18% discrepancy between the most affluent and least. So it's a picture that everybody's encountering, which is a good thing in some respects, because there'll be some wider understanding and shared knowledge around how we could potentially overcome these challenges in particular. I think the return to normality, as best we can say that from a COVID perspective, from a school-based engagement, is really good. It's enabling teams that I sort of oversee from an active young people team perspective to really get in and really engage with our children that may well not have had that parental support throughout the pandemic. Because I think when we were returning through that first lockdown in particular, whenever I used to drive into town to drop my son into nursery, you would see individuals that were taking the opportunity to be going for a walk or going for a run that necessarily wouldn't have previously prior to the pandemic, because everybody was looking for that 1 hour of escapism, really, to a certain extent after that first lockdown. So I think that is something where if you have been fortunate to have that parental support network that value sport and physical activity and the wider benefits that it brings to you as an individual, that you can really take advantage of that. But we are focused around our most disadvantaged engagement with our children and families at a school level, and that probably will translate into a community engagement perspective as well. And we've got a number of initiatives now that are in the process of being launched or have been launched from a community perspective that are free provisions in targeted areas across the county as well. So it's interesting from your standpoint, Fraser, the line of question, and there have been some real interesting insight that's been pulled together, and I guess the next 18 months really from a community sport perspective, as I sort of alluded to before we came on air, where the WRU have recently announced that teams at a senior level could play 12 aside. It doesn't necessarily paint as particularly rosy picture as we would like to think. Whereas then other national governing bodies or sports may well have flourished in the pandemic. So alluded to, cricket wasn't impacted in that first lockdown. In the summer of 2020, they were able to return because it was an outdoor sport, and the research had been undertaken around the use of the ball and the transfer of COVID as a consequence of that. So, and they've got some really good initiatives from All Stars and Dynamo's perspective as well, which has enhanced engagement at a real grassroots level.
Yeah. Looking on the financial side of things, and Matthew, obviously every council throughout Britain are facing cutbacks, and obviously your department is no different to anybody else's. Is it going to be a really difficult time for you to try and get the figures right and get the money going in the right direction to the sports you feel need to grow? Are you going to have enough funding for that?
I think first and foremost, the funding that we get internally within the authority, we know where that stands, which is good. External funding from Sport Wales, that is a flatline budget now for the next 2 years, indicative, which poses problems, definitely, because we've just had a salary inflation increase for the members of staff there, which obviously wasn't accounted for, and we've got exactly the same next year. But I think for me, it poses opportunities as well to think outside the box as to how you can access funding. It's not very much focused around your traditional route of funding through Sport Wales. It could be through corporate sponsorship. We are very fortunate to be corporately sponsored by Valero. And that goes a long way. It really does make a big difference, and that's a particular avenue that I'm keen to explore moving forwards. We've got a lot of opportunities, I feel, and it's a case of building the business case first and foremost, and presenting some real powerful projects that are going to tick the box from potential funding, sponsorship perspective, but also meet our strategy and the authority's vision moving forwards as well. So it's a case of joining the dots up as effectively as you possibly can. But yeah, it is a challenge. It certainly is one that everybody is encountering, and it will subsequently knock on to community sport clubs as well, because there's been some really interesting pieces of work and insight done where prior to the pandemic, the average low-income family had £3.75 to spend on sport and physical activity for their per week, whereas the average was £12.67. But because of the cost of living crisis, now as we come out of April, May, we'll understand what that picture looks like a little bit more, and how that transfers over to participation rates would be really, really interesting. And I guess that's where us as a department providing free opportunities in the community is really, really important. And we need to build on that, because lots of families are going to have some difficult decisions to be made, even though they may value and understand the wider benefits of sport and physical activity. First and foremost, it is heating and food on the table. That's most important.
I'm focusing on a major positive now, Matt. Obviously, we've got the facilities. Gordon talked about in the show, the Pembrokeshire Sports Village, where he has a season ticket on Saturdays when he's in football. And then and the facilities at Caerelin are as, I can honestly say, as good as I've ever seen at a Pembrokeshire primary school. So how important is it to have those things now on hand, which haven't always been in Pembrokeshire in the past, to encourage youngsters to take it up?
I think it's fantastic that we have finally started to reap the benefits of facility development within the authority, without a shadow of a doubt, and also Henry Tudor as well, and Gellerswick. They're another two sites that have benefited from 21st century schools and the subsequent sports facilities here. I think Haverfordwest High in particular and Caerelin are two facilities that are utilised by the community quite significantly. I know on the weekend Goodwick played Milner's Bridge at Haverfordwest High, didn't they? And obviously you have to question whether that fixture would have been fulfilled if Milner's Bridge were to be playing up the racecourse, given the weather that we'd had over in the run-up to that weekend. And I know I was chatting to Gary Nicholas this morning when we were travelling up to a meeting, and he took advantage of the fact that Henry Tudor's rugby the 3G pitch down there wasn't being used, and Narberth under 11s, under 7s, and under 8s fulfilled their fixture on the weekend as well.
Brilliant.
So
Brilliant.
it gives an opportunity for children and families to continue to play and be exposed to new opportunities, which is really good. And I think that it is going to be, in Haverfordwest High in particular, and Kyrell, and having those fantastic facilities, it is only going to enthuse and motivate children to be physically active, and they feel sort of valued, and they value those facilities as well as being part of the school. And like, Haverfordwest High is pretty much on a par to Cardiff Met, really, with regards to what they've got there from the 2 indoor sports hall with the SAW attached to it as well, which is another fantastic facility. So we are very, very fortunate, but there's always a need and demand for more opportunities and for the development of facilities, which ultimately comes at a cost, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know you're talking about the core sports, Matthew, like football, rugby, cricket. They're the main core sports. And you were saying about the rugby 12-a-side participation through the WRU at senior level. Seems a shame that it's come into that. But the other thing I'm going on to, that I think today kids have far more opportunities than what they did back in my day. We only had the core sports. So the reasons why participation levels may be going down in those sports is because they got so many other things on offer, which, you know, is a good thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think you're quite right. Back in my day as well, Gordon, at secondary school, it was very much the core sports as well. The range of offers now, from a school perspective, but also a community perspective, it has just increased exponentially, which is really good, because individuals and children may not well be suited to the traditional sports, but they possess a skill set that can be transferred over to something, another activity in particular. And we are very much a coastal county, and taking advantage of the water, the environment that we live and breathe around. So there's so much on offer now, which only ultimately benefits everybody, because I do firmly believe there is something out there for everybody. They've just got to
definitely
expose to it and understand it, and it'll capture their imagination. And that's the beauty of sort of some of the initiatives that we run, where it's a development of a skill set, a fundamental motor skill set that can be transferred across. So if you're able to run, jump, throw, kick, strike at some point throughout your sporting career or your life course, you can dip into lots of different activities. You may ultimately find the one that you most enjoy at a later part in your life, or you could be fortunate to find it sooner rather than later. But you possess that skill set that enables you to do that.
Yeah, and is there some form of the strategy that looks at like the education of the benefits of physical health? Because the opportunities are there, but you mentioned there's that disparity between the affluent and those that don't have that disposable income. What is there a strategy to educate those and to really give those opportunities to their lap, essentially, and say that this is the benefit you're going to have if you take part in this?
There are the way that is presented to children and to families, because we sit within education, but it's not really our role to educate specifically. That's obviously done through mainstream education. We can talk about the wider benefits and make them abundantly aware of the wider benefits associated. But I think what we're in the process of doing now very much is using other professional staff from Public Health Wales, for instance, within education as well, to educate them, and they can obviously talk to to families and children as well. So getting clear messages across is really, really important, and consistent messages as well, because ultimately we're just a small cog in a larger organisation here, and a larger vision for sport within Wales, ultimately, and that we can't solve everything, and we've got to be mindful of that, but we can play a significantly contributing factor in that.
Yeah. Fraser, you were going to come in with something.
Yeah, no, just one question. I'm interested in your theory here, Matt. Now, I know obviously there's been, and this is in the Sports Pembrokeshire initiative, obviously, but there have been school closures or cuts, certainly, from education authorities in Pembrokeshire in the last few years. Now, my concern now is this lack of sixth forms in a lot of schools. Now, I know there is a centralised sixth form college, But you've got the people who are playing sport. It doesn't have to be a core sport or a team sport or whatever, but playing sport in an environment they're familiar with from the age of, say, 10, 11 to 16, and all of a sudden they haven't got sixth form then. You haven't got a first 15 or a first 11 or a group of mates you've been running cross country with. All of a sudden they go into this unfamiliar environment. I don't know the sporting setup in these centralised sixth form places, but it goes without saying that all of a sudden there's less opportunity for them to feature in teams. And my worry is, you're going to have people, not necessarily people who excel, but people who have been casually taking part in sport, whether it be a social thing or enjoyment thing, who get to college, suddenly aren't within the immediate group of friends that they were, and they tail off from sport then. All of a sudden, the teams that they were in aren't accessible to them anymore. And then from 16, 18, they lose that a bit, and then they go to university, where a lot of people do drop off for various reasons anyway, and a lot of development, I want to say, and previous enjoyment almost goes to waste. Do you have a concern that as well, that the schools who don't have sixth forms, we are going to lose sports people after 16?
It is an interesting question, Fraser, and I think the college are really broadening their offer, in particular, to really meet the wider community, in particular. And now that they have their own facilities on site, that makes provision significantly easier. It's always been a challenge for them, but there's ways and means around this, to be honest. I think this is where community sport can really come to play and really enhance and support, because what you alluded to there could be exactly the same scenario that potentially is happening in Haverfordwest High, for instance, where you have large cohorts of children in each year group as well, because it is difficult. But I think I'm of the firm opinion that if children have the skill set, they will be able to continue in some way, shape or form. We know at certain points throughout their education life cycle, people dip in and out anyway, and the same within your as you go into your professional work capacity as well. Life challenges take over. So it's one that's very interesting. I'm going to sit on the fence, to be perfectly honest. That's the easiest way to put it. But we are working proactively with the college from that perspective, and also other secondary schools as well, to really broaden out. And from a community perspective, I think that's where the real opportunities lie.
I mean, that's what I wanted to hear from us at Sport Pembrokeshire, are actually working with the college on that, and realise that you had input, so you still do have input into the college as well when you need these secondary schools. So that's heartening to hear, to be honest.
Yeah. Matt, just very quickly then, but before you send you away this year, what anybody that's watching this or listening to this, or it gets shared with them, what is it that how do you want them to interact with sport in Pembrokeshire, like whether they're juniors or seniors or even older seniors? What's the message that you want to put out to people, just very quickly here?
I think it's very much around trying new activities. If there's something that you've really got a passion to have a go at, definitely get in touch with us within Sport Pembrokeshire. We've got a database of all community sport and physical activity providers within the county, and I think from a parent's perspective, we would be the first port of call, really, from that perspective, because we do know what's going on within the wider community, and really just to take the opportunity to explore and try new things, because I think from a social perspective, the social return on investment is really, really important. Sport and physical activity contributes so much to the wider societal impact, and from a health perspective as well. We know what the wider associated health benefits of being active are, but then it's from a children's perspective, it's the softer skills that you develop that you don't necessarily take for granted whilst you're just having fun with your friends. The ability to communicate, team building, problem solving, which obviously then support and give you practical examples when you go into professional employment as well, that you can draw upon. So a real mix, really, to a certain extent.
Give it a go. So regardless of the challenges that are going to be faced by everyone, there's going to be opportunities, and to get in contact with Sport Pembrokeshire. Matt, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been really insightful to see how the cogs work, not at an individual community basis, but looking at the overall map of the fact of physical engagement here in Pembrokeshire. So thank you so much, and all the best with the year ahead and getting the most out of those facilities that we've mentioned all around the county.
Yeah, definitely.
And in fact, we're actually going to be mentioning another place, Nayland, in the community hub in just a second when we come back after a very short break, because the indoor cricket league is coming to a close next week and the week after for Division 1, Division 2, and there's matches being played right now. So we're going to take a very, probably less than a minute or just over a minute. Matt, thank you so much for joining us, and no doubt we'll be speaking to you again over the coming weeks and months as we go into summer and then back into autumn later on as well. So thank you so much.
The Sports Awards soon, so we'll have to be.
Yeah.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew.
There you go. We'll be back very shortly. It is 10 to 9 here on the Pure West Sports Show with Ethan Evans and Morris Solicitors.
Pure West Sports